into that portion of our session, and I'd like to introduce Judy Brown. Judy is a Torontonian and an older worker, job seeker. She's going to give you some of her own perspectives in terms of her own journey in trying to move and continue her career after 45. Judy has over 20 years of administrative HR and property management experience with the private and nonprofit sectors. And just over a year ago, she experienced a difficult job loss after 12 years with the same company. And so we've invited her to speak about her experience with that and her experiences since moving forward. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you for inviting me to speak today. So it was just over a year ago, I was standing in my bedroom, looking down at my bed. I had my sock drawer emptied out on the bed, and I couldn't decide anything. What to do with these socks? Do I sort them? Do I throw some of these out? I was a mess. Basically, I had been let go from an organization that I'd been with for 12 years. I had worked for the first 10 years very happily in that organization as an office manager. And then I transitioned into an HR position, which seemed like kind of a natural progression. And it was a steep uphill climb. I had to learn quite a bit. It was very exciting, but the circumstances that happened, I ended up losing my job through no fault of my own, but just basically a restructuring. So here I was, 54 years old, and not knowing whether I was able to work. I was depressed, I was anxious, I had had prolonged stress for a couple of years at least, and I just didn't know what was going to happen. So I took a couple of months to just read books and listen to music and go for walks and just try to take care of myself so that I could get to the point where I could have a conversation with another person, which was tough at that time. And so after I was feeling stronger, I was fortunate enough to have been given an opportunity to obtain some career counseling. And I did that after a few months of sort of reaffirming what it is that I wanted to do. I decided that I wanted to continue on in my HR career. And I was able to put together my resume and send it out. And send it out, and send it out, and send it out. And what I learned in the 12 years since I had been job searching, things were quite different. One of the things that I noticed was that you don't get a lot of feedback. So you have to just forget that you sent that resume in or that application. And I had to learn that there were other ways, like we've been talking about, the other people have talked about today. There's lots of different ways of doing it these days. You know, the networking, the connecting. Fortunately, I'm a fairly social person, so it's not been too difficult for me to make that leap, but it's still intimidating to walk into a room or walk into this room and stand up and talk in front of a bunch of people you don't know, or even speak to one person. But it is important. So I guess what happened, I sent out my resumes, I got a few responses, I ended up getting interviewed, about 3 or 4 interviews. 2 of them sent me on to second interviews. It was very exciting, I was very thrilled. And then I had no job offer. I missed out. And that was hard. It was hard to, on the positive side, and I'm an optimist, I thought, well, at least I got to the second interview stage. I must be doing something right with my resume. I must be doing something right in the interviews. And because I work in HR, I've done interviews, so I've been on the other side of the table. And I understand that you make decisions based on a whole variety of things, and if you're making it to even the first interview, you're doing something right. So I tried not to take that personally. So I went back to sending out some more resumes, and I was fortunate enough to receive a call from a recruiter who offered me a temporary position, and I was looking for full-time, but I guess JP was talking about plan A, plan B, so I did sort of have a plan B. I was willing to accept something that was short-term. And in June, I went and I worked as an interim HR manager at a publishing company. I knew nothing about publishing, and I was pretty light on the HR as well, but they knew that, and I went into this position. It was supposed to be a 2-month contract, and I'm still there, so it's 3.5 months later. Now that contract is ending in a couple of weeks, so I'm happy to be here to also do some networking. But when I reflect on where I was at a year ago to where I am now, because I'm now going to be sending out more resumes, you know, getting no responses, hopefully getting some responses, I realize that the journey that I've gone through, some of the things that I've learned that were really helpful to me, I just wanted to share a couple of those with you, just to let you know. So I would say the first thing I had to overcome personally was the negative thoughts in my head. I'd had a great experience, work-life experience, but I had a couple of years that were really hard. And I was doubting myself. So learning to recognize when I'm having those thoughts, understand that they're just thoughts, you know, you're thinking that you can't do it because you were having difficulty in a certain situation before. That doesn't mean you're not going to be able to do it the next time. So challenging those negative thoughts has been really helpful. The second thing that I've done, which has been talked about here, is the building of the network and connecting with people. And I'm fortunate. I've got a really supportive family, supportive friends, and I also try to be a good friend and be a good support to my family as well. So I relied on people. When I was feeling down, I would call them up and I'd say, geez, you know, I sent out 3 resumes this week and nobody called me back. Or I sent out 60 resumes and nobody called me back. And that really helped to reach out and get support. And my friends and family would remind me of the assets and the things that I did bring to a job, and that was a big help. The other things, I did a few other things that I think were very helpful for me. One was I reached out to a couple of colleagues, one colleague and one friend, who were also in the older age group, which I never really thought of myself as an older person, but I'm getting older. So, and we got together. In fact, we would meet here for coffee in the coffee shop here at the reference library once a week, and we would talk, and we would, depending on what was needed that week, sometimes we'd have to, you know, occasionally we would do mock interviews if one of us was getting a job interview and wanted to practice. Sometimes it was just talking about our personal lives. A lot of times it was looking at the job search process, and that was a really important step for me, I think, in terms of knowing I had people I could call, and also people that I could support myself, because that made me feel better about myself. If I could boost somebody up and help them with their job search, that meant a lot to me. And I would also say that the other important thing was getting focused. When I left my job, I didn't know whether I wanted to go back to school and become a carpenter. I was pretty depressed about the office situation I'd been in, and I had to go through that full circle and decide that yes, I do in fact enjoy HR. And no, that's not why I was feeling crappy. It was because of the work situation that I was in, and I want to continue that process. So I'm continuing on my education in HR, and I have an elevator speech, sort of, more or less. I'm going to have to practice it again, obviously. But focusing in, so when someone says, well, what are you looking for? I don't have to say, oh, I'll do anything, or what you got, right? I will say I am an HR professional with a very strong administrative background, and I'm eager to work for an organization that is positive and does good things for society. a values-based driven organization is where I'd like to be. So that's my story so far. It continues to go. I'm looking forward to chatting with various people here, but I wanted to end with a very brief quote that I thought was, it inspired me, and I hope it inspires you a little bit. It was the American writer, activist, and feminist, Betty Friedan, once said, "Aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength."